Hi everybody, this is Jeff and Faye from earlytrauma.com. Today we're doing a video on our in our continuing series on TDCs, or trauma disrupted competencies. A trauma disrupted competency is a area of life that doesn't get um, mastered properly and creates problems for the child later in life. We've looked at this through this lens because it gives us a way to see the children's behaviors from a lens that isn't the child is bad. Last week we did the negative internal working model. Today we're going to start off with developmental delays. Faye, would you like to explain what developmental delays are?
Yeah, I think it's really important when we look at our kids with early trauma to figure out the holes in their development. We know from early traumatic experiences that children's development gets off course.
Mm-hmm.
That when you think about the relationship between the mom and the baby, on how that relationship spurs any kind of maturation. The mom or dad will, they'll buy a mobile and they'll hang it up and get the baby's eyes to track that mobile. They'll do the patty cakes and they'll show them. They'll do the shape sorters and stuff. But it's through that relationship that development occurs. And without that relationship, the child really is left alone to figure out the world on their own.
And if they miss any of those developmental points,
Mm-hmm.
the learning is sequential. So if you miss point A,
Right,
you have a harder time mastering part B,
right.
point B. And if you miss point A and you somehow manage to sort of master part B, well, part C is still coming along and that still might be difficult.
Yeah, and in the attachment world, we talk about the safe haven and secure base, the ability to go out and explore from the parent and then go back to the parent for comfort. And if you don't have that parent figure that's providing the hands to hold this child, then that child, some kids actually get terrified and they can't go out and explore. They get stuck.
I like to
Okay.
explain it through the idea of blocks.
Yeah, you do.
Um, you know, one of the strangest things to me always is the idea that children can't learn to stack blocks
Mm-hmm.
until they learn to knock over blocks.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in order to learn to knock over blocks, they have to have someone
Someone to build
else
those,
to
yeah.
stack those blocks first, which makes this whole process, this whole learning process. And there's a lot of other steps involved in that process. For instance, before a child can learn to stack a block, they have to learn to reach out.
Yeah.
Before and after they learn to reach out, once they got that mastered, then they have to learn to grasp.
Mm-hmm.
And once they learn to grasp, then they have to learn to move.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those things are taught in a dependent way with the primary caregiver.
Yeah.
And if any one of those stages is off, the next stage becomes harder to master. The weird thing is, some of this stuff is learned limbically,
Mm-hmm.
in the back brain before the cognitive brain even comes online.
Oh, yeah.
And the difference between limbic brain learning and front brain learning is how much intention is required.
Mm-hmm.
For me right now to pick up a block, like I could talk to you and I could reach out and pick it up and it wouldn't be a problem.
Right.
But if I hadn't learned it limbically, how to reach out, how to grasp, how to pick up, I would have to think about, a part of my front brain would have to be intentional and think about, well, I need to put this arm out, I need to take this, and it's much slower.
Mm-hmm.
When the things aren't learned that way, the mastery of the doing of them later in life becomes much more difficult, much more intentional, and sometimes uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think of children, for instance, whose early environments didn't give them the opportunity to, say, eat a variety of foods. When they went from milk to solid foods, there just wasn't a large variety available.
No, how many times have we been in homes where kids are carrying around some kind of bag of snacks, and to sit down at a table and to eat with silverware. There are stages that go along before a child can pick up a fork or a spoon and eat from them, but they have to be exposed to sitting in a high chair and giving those utensils and then manipulating them. So we wonder.
How about those foster and adoptive placements that we've gone into to work with, and they've said, we don't understand. He won't eat anything except cold hot dogs and macaroni and cheese.
Yes.
And it has to be Kraft macaroni. It can't even be like
Oh yeah, 'cause
homemade.
it's got a special yellow to
Yeah.
it that they have.
And and from a developmental delay part, they must have spent, or they could have spent, a great deal of time eating those foods, and so they didn't master the chewing required, or the
Right.
the taste tolerations and sensitivities that are normal.
The different textures that
Right.
meat has a different texture than a tomato, and how so many of our kids are repulsed even by vegetables.
And let's talk about the developmental nature of play quickly.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if a child never learns to play with that primary caregiver?
Yeah.
Then the child ends up later in life looking at their peers, seeing that they're playing, having a part of them that wants to play like that, but doesn't have the skill built to play with.
Yeah, well, let's go back to holding a fork. If you didn't learn to hold a fork, you don't have the dexterity, and then your buddies are playing ball, and you have to manipulate a ball, hold, toss, catch, all the things that go with it, and you're going to be behind.
So if the child's early environment lacked opportunities, or a caring, attuned caregiver, then those learning could be skewed.
Yeah, think of the homes that we've been in where the floor is too dirty for the kids to sit on. There's too many people, too many frightening people. I mean, some of the homes have had really big, angry dogs and things, and the kids' brains are stuck in fear and not having the experience to sit on the floor, to learn to crawl or to roll or to sit up. They're going to be behind just physically because of the missed opportunities.
Now, when a child has a developmental delay, TDC, okay, a disrupted competency in a developmental area somewhere, how does that show up in behaviors later on?
Oh, I hate to say this, but too many of our kids get a ADD or ADHD diagnosis because they're not able to remain focused or involved in an activity. Well, they never learn to regulate with that parent and play. Therefore, they're kind of just loose or all over the place and not having any means to regulate in an activity. So they're not going to be able to stay focused.
When I was taught to play basketball, one of the things that I remember noticing was that some people were able to figure out where the other person was going to be in that court and throw the ball there, and some people were not. And that could be a trauma disrupted competency right there. It could be a developmental delay because, again, they never learned to play with. They never learned to anticipate someone else limbically, and so they're constantly having to figure everything out as they go.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be able to play basketball as well, for instance.
With that, there's that ability to tolerate someone having the ball and you not having it, and to wait till you can get the ball.
Frustration tolerance is a learned activity.
Oh, it is.
You think how little children, infants, they'll just get frustrated when they can't do anything and just clear the whole table off right away.
Yeah.
Well, at some point, you have to learn to tolerate that level of dysregulation of anger or fear, so that you can continue to play and you don't end your play experience right there. And if you haven't mastered that, then you don't learn to play properly.
Yeah. Oh, and just in the big picture of play, a lot of times our kids will be disruptive to other people playing because it really doesn't make sense in their head. They may be more prone to playing with younger kids because it fits those developmental holes that younger play makes more sense to them, and they even may regress to a younger presentation during that time.
Well, before you can learn to play with, you have to learn to play alone. And a lot of children lack that developmental stage, and what we see then is they can't play. When there's not an adult right there guiding and directing them, they dysregulate. They start to break rules. They start to do unsafe behaviors, things that require the return of that adult's attention.
When you mention that, I don't know how many times I've said to someone, tell me about your child's play, and they'll say, well, yeah, they play with cards. They line them all up, and that's the extent of play. They have no ability to imagine that car
Yeah, they were
zooming
arrested at
around.
that level. They learned to line them up, but they didn't learn to imagine,
Right.
you know, what to do with that line after you build it. Again, with blocks, they learn to stack the block, but they don't learn to then the next step is to imagine a building with it
Right.
and build a building.
Right.
A lot of times you'll get a lot of dysregulation with this particular TDC. A lot of anger, a lot of fear and anger and frustration. Because if no one bothers to diagnose it or explain it to the child starts to go through life with this experience of,
Right.
I can't do the things that my peers do routinely and effortlessly. I can't do them. And of course, that begins the building the I suck part of their brain.
It goes right back to the negative internal working model, that piece. I must really be a bad kid. I can't even play like Billy does next door.
So you get you get those quick and rapid, sometimes over responses to not being able. I mean, I don't know how many kids we've worked with that cognitively they can play Uno, but they can't that card game. But they can't play. They can't deal with the frustration of someone making them pick up 4 cards when they were so close to winning.
Yeah.
So the games only go that far for them, and then they throw the cards down or knock them off the table, and it ends.
Yeah.
So one of the things we encourage, this is just one of the things we encourage with developmental delays, is you have to be able to recognize what it is. And then you want to be able to include opportunities in that child's current environment to utilize, learn, and master those previously unmastered skills.
Yes.
And you want to do it in a non-shaming way.
Yeah. And then our last one, which I think you're always on top of, that inaccurate presentation, where at one moment they're presenting this way, and then the next thing you know, we're seeing that.
And again, the thing to remember is, they're going to get older, and their brain is going to grow, and they're going to gain skills. But skills are not the same thing. Cognitive skills are not the same thing as limbic brain mastery. So the presentation, as you said, is it's not consistent across domains.
Right.
Sometimes they can do a behavior. They can play tag with the other kids for a half an hour. But then the next time, bam, they get hit when they didn't want to get hit. They get angry and upset, and they're out right away in the first minute or two.
Right.
The goal is to allow those opportunities for that child to experience it. And when they can't handle it, you just you pull them aside and you label to them. Yeah, it's part of you struggling right now.
Yeah, it's where I like the idea about the window of tolerance, which is kind of off topic here, but if we know our kid's stressed, we need to know that their presentation may not be the same as it was when they're not stressed.
Yep. Window of tolerance goes down.
Yes. Well, thank you all for watching. This is the TDCs and developmental delays.
Thanks for
Take
listening.
care.